A couple of days ago, I did a video on Thomas Piketty and his new book, Capital in the 21st Century, where his primary complaint and gives 200 years of data to show that wealth inequality has increased, and it has always gone up. And essentially, he marks true everything that Karl Marx said was going to happen. And this book is hailed as revolutionary. It's a huge thing, an eye-opening, and Paul Krugman, New York Times economic columnist, a guy I really like, but God, he's such a liberal douche sometimes, comes out and says that, this is everything that he's been warning people about the uncontrolled rise of the 1% and inequality and all those things that happen. And we as Marxists are sitting here going, yeah, we've been saying for quite a long time that this has been going on. And we've been saying that it was going on. And they've been saying, oh, it's not happening. Marx was wrong because he's Marx. Now I've had the chance to read a little bit of what was in the book. And he actually does mention Marx and mention Marx's writings and Marx's theory. Essentially, he says that Marx was right, but Marx is still wrong because he's Karl Marx. Now that seems a little bit confusing, so let me put it in a much simpler way. It is either a tendency for a rising net return on capital, or it is the tendency for a falling rate of profit. That is the key contradiction in capitalism. There is no question. We've seen the rate of profit fall consistently. This chart shows adequately what has happened. We can also see the various significant economic events that occurred with each dip in the rate of profit. In the 1970s, we saw the war on unions beginning, neoliberalism in the 80s, the passing of the NAFTA agreement in 94, early and late 2000s were marked by a falling rate of profit and a collapse of bubbles, both the dot-com bubble and the housing bubble, respectively. It is important to note that in the late 90s to mid-2000s, we had the opening up of China and India. I don't think there's any question here for us what has happened, but let's deal with some of the claims made by Piketty in his book. Marx thought that capitalism would have an apocalyptic end, but thanks to modern economic growth and the diffusion of knowledge, that has been avoided. But there is still the problem of deep structures of capital inequality. As the chart adequately demonstrates, we do see that decline happening, the end of the profitability of capitalism, which is steadily going down and has not gone on a trend back up. We are heading towards what it is that Marx said. What Piketty is essentially saying is, it hasn't happened yet, so therefore it won't happen. Like his predecessors, Marx totally neglected the possibility of durable technological process and steadily increasing productivity, which is a force that can to some extent serve as a counterweight to the process of accumulation and concentration of capital. Well, there's a couple things wrong here with this statement. Marx very specifically did write about technological innovation and increased efficiency, and how that actually would, create more concentrations of capital. And that is what happened. These are some of the writings that Marx gave that apparently Piketty doesn't know exists. Machinery produces relative surplus value, not only by directly depreciating the value of labor power, and by indirectly cheapening the same through cheapening the commodities that enter into its reproduction, but also when it is first introduced sporadically into an industry by converting the labor employed by the owner of that machinery into labor of a higher degree and greater efficiency, by raising the social value of the article produced above its individual value, and thus enabling the capitalist to replace the value of a day's labor power by a smaller portion of the value of a day's product. During this transition period, when the use of machinery is a sort of monopoly, the profits are therefore exceptional, and the capitalist endeavors to exploit thoroughly the sunny time of this his first love by prolonging the working day as much as possible. The magnitude of the profit whets his appetite for more profit. If the general extension of factory legislation to all trades for the purpose of protecting the working class both in mind and body has become inevitable, On the other hand, as we have already pointed out, that extension hastens on the general conversion of numerous isolated small industries into a few combined industries carried on upon a large scale. It therefore accelerates the concentration of capital and the exclusive predominance of the factory system. It destroys both the ancient and the transitional forms, behind which the dominion of capital is still in part concealed, and replaces them by the direct and open sway of capital. But thereby it also generalizes the direct opposition to this sway. Evidently, Piketty never actually read Capital, because if he had, he would have read chapter 15, which is all about technological development. What he's also saying in here, in his liberal social democratic way, is that technological innovation creates a space in the market for new competitors to come in. Thus, there cannot be great concentrations of capital. Well, we already know this to be false, as we have seen the concentration of that capital over the last 200 years, which I think his book actually also demonstrates quite beautifully. This idea that technological innovation could open up a space for somebody new is just blatantly false. Technological innovation is very capital intensive, meaning it costs quite a lot to get some kind of innovation off the ground, from idea to existing reality. Well, there's only a few places that actually have that kind of capital to do it. That would be the government and very large firms. And that's why they lead in developments, in research and development, because they have the capital to put into it, whereas a small business or someone who doesn't even have a business yet doesn't have to put into it. Marx's theory implicitly relies on a strict assumption of zero productivity growth over the long run. This is absolutely false and goes directly against everything it is that Marx wrote about. Marx wrote how the development of the productive forces in society, from hunter-gatherer society all the way up to capitalism, has been an increase in efficiency. It's been able to create more and more, and that the great thing about capitalism is that it produces well beyond what one person needs. It's that excess beyond a personal need that gets sold. And when something's no longer a use value and becomes an exchange value, to even say that Marx had no conception of increased efficiency or being able to produce more is just absolutely false. Generally, an alteration in the labor process of such a kind as to shorten the labor time socially necessary for the production of a commodity, and to endow a given quantity of labor with the power of producing a greater quantity of use value. It's very clear that Piketty never actually read Capital at all. I mean, it's very clear that he doesn't even understand some of the most basic concepts of Marxist theory. And as a final example, he gives this. Marx fails because in his model of capitalism there is an infinite accumulation of capital, as ever more increasing quantities of capital lead inexorably to a falling rate of profit, i.e. return on capital, and eventually to their own downfall, while growth in net income falls to zero. See, the problem with this is that Marx doesn't give us a model of capitalism. He takes the model of capitalism that is given to us and critiques that. This idea of infinite expansion of capitalism is actually something capitalism itself believes in, although it does not explicitly say that. It doesn't believe that there are limits to capital. Keynesians on some level believe that there are limits to capital, environmental, etc. But there is no general acknowledgement of a limit to capital, and this goes right from Keynesianism right to Austrians. They both are predicated on an infinite growth model. This is not Marx's idea. This comes right from capitalism itself. Marx did not create a straw man. Marx worked right with the argument that was being given to us by the capitalist class and its bourgeois ideologues. Let this all serve as an example of the ideological work that's actually done in Piketty's book. Essentially, he takes the fact that Marx was right about everything that was coming along, and then he turns around and then just simply says, oh no, Marx is wrong because he's Karl Marx, and then completely change his argument so that he's still wrong even though everything he predicted actually came true. So I just want you to keep that in mind if you do decide to go ahead and purchase his book. I think it might actually be very entertaining and does give a significant amount of data and argumentation towards the increasing inequality that we've seen over the past 200 years. But just keep this kind of ideological and academic dishonesty when you're reading his book. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. And while you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.